Ideabytes is pleased to welcome you to our series of cybersecurity testing webinars. Episode 1.
Hello, I'm Anna Anthony, VP Operations at Ideabytes Inc., and a strong believer in proactively securing our work environment, IT infrastructure, the backbone of operations. Our first of cybersecurity webinar series focuses on securing application on Docker, a popular deployment methodology used today. Conducting today's webinar is Thierry Bella, Ideabytes cybersecurity architect. Thierry has over 15 years of domain experience under his belt. Thierry is passionate about cybersecurity and enjoys training newcomers in becoming cyber sleuths. Welcome, everyone. Thierry Bella, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So welcome to today's webinar, how to avoid security pitfalls when deploying your applications on Docker. So this meeting is being recorded, and you will have the video available on demand after this session. And for your questions, you will be able to send them in the chat, and we will answer the questions after the presentation. So today agenda, we will start with an overview of Docker tools, and we will present the different attack surfaces with a demonstration, and we will give some recommendation about how to improve Docker security, and we will conclude with questions and answer session. And about me, I'm Chief Architect Security and Performance at Ideabytes, and I have over 15 years in IT. And I really love to discuss about security and run penetration testing, talking about discussing with the developers to help them adopt more secure coding practices. And I'm also mentoring graduate cybersecurity students. Then let's talk about Docker. Docker is a platform, a virtualization platform that is used to develop, ship, and manage containerized applications. And the advantage of Docker is it enables the separation of the application and the infrastructure. So it's really quick to deploy applications using Docker. And it will also ensure that the app is behaving the same way regardless the environment. I'm pretty sure you already know about this issue where your application will work flawlessly on development, but once in production, it will fail, maybe because of a different architecture or missing software or incompatible version or any other difference. Docker will solve this problem because all the dependencies are bundled within the container. So when it works on dev, you are pretty sure it will work everywhere. And you can manage your infrastructure with Docker, just like you manage your applications, it's easy to scale the applications based on the need. And you will usually use orchestration tools such as Kubernetes, Docker Swarm, and maybe Docker Compose also. So with Dockers, there are some tools and concepts that you need to be familiar with if you want to use Docker. The first is the Docker file. When you want to build your own container, you need to create a file that is called a Docker file, where you will put all the instructions about how to build your container. There are also container images. Images are like they are frozen. They cannot be changed. They contain the application and all the binaries that are necessary to run it. And a Docker container is simply a Docker image that is running, that is being executed. Docker Hub is a platform where you will usually publish your container. It is called, it is a Docker registry. You have other registries as well, such as Google Cloud, Amazon, and Azure that also provide registries. You can also set up your own registry. You need also to know about the Docker daemon, which is the Docker service running on your host. And Docker registry, when we talk about Docker registry, it's like a database where you will search the images you want to use, you will pull them, you will run them on your computer. So that's about the Docker tools and concepts. And let's talk about today's topic, which is the Docker security. So the first attack surface we will talk about is the Docker daemon. The first issue with Docker daemon security is the unsecure remote configuration. When you will search about how to configure your Docker daemon, you will typically find this systemd unit description online. You create a service, you put these instructions, how to open a TCP port to run Docker. But this is very dangerous, as I will show you. So I have my virtual machine that is running here with its IP address, which is 192.168.2.55. I have a container running on a Docker daemon running on another machine that I have configured to open the Docker port using TCP. And you will see that it's really easy to connect to that machine, because the Docker daemon doesn't require authentication. So all I need to do is run this command. By doing this, I'm making my Docker on this host to point to the Docker daemon that is running on a different server. And then I can start querying that host. Docker images. I see a lot of images that are part of that host. So when you set up your Docker daemon using TCP configuration, you make it available for anyone. If you have a public IP address, anyone will be able to connect from the internet to your Docker's daemon and start running containers. And it doesn't require authentication. So I can run the hello world. Docker run hello world. And the hello world image has been downloaded and executed from that host. So I will connect to that other host. So this is the other host. And if I run Docker images, I will see that the Docker hello world image has been downloaded on that host. So there are other security issues like misconfiguration, Docker daemon misconfiguration. An example of those issues is the CVE 2020-27-35-2. So CVEs are common vulnerability enumeration, and it's a database of known vulnerabilities that can be exploited by malicious hackers and other ransomware and all kind of attacks. So this CVE describes how to gain root privilege from a container because the Docker daemon is being misconfigured. So let's move to the container. Docker can also be attacked using malicious containers or dangerous command line flags. Let's look at an example of container image. This is OpenCV3 container image. You can find it on Docker Hub and GitHub. And this is the README of the container. They tell you, they give you the list of applications that are required to run OpenCV, and they give you this command line. Docker run, the name of your container, and the privilege flag. But what you need to know is the privilege flag give the attacker the complete access to your host. So if I'm running a container with the privilege flag, I can gain access to the host, the full access to the host, and read every file, change them as well. So let's see how to do that. So this is my container. And this is my command line. I run the BuzzyBox image with the privilege flag. Let's download it and run it. I'm already connected to the BuzzyBox. Because I have privilege, I can run the fdisk command -L. It will show me the device configuration, and I can mount the host device. I create my mount point and I run the mount command. I've mounted the host hard drive, and let's see what's inside. So I can see the EFI file that is used to boot the host. So if I delete it, the host will not be able to boot again. I can create another mount point. Okay, it doesn't let me see the other drive. But basically, you can see the hard drive, you can mount it, and you can have a full access to that device. I can show you eventually. This is the Ubuntu boot folder. You see the grab configuration of the host. I can delete it and the host will not be able to boot. So before you go and use any container, read carefully what they said. You need to understand what each flag is doing. Otherwise, you will give full access to that container to your host, and you can be hacked or incur a data breach or any malicious action from inside that container, especially if it's a malicious container. With Docker, it is also possible to see all the processes that are running on the host. So I will show you quickly how to do that. So you have the PID flag. The PID is used to set which namespace to use for the PID for the container. If I set PID to host, it will allow me to see the host process. If I run PS, I can see all the processes that are running on the host. I'm not even using a root account. Let's run the same command without PID. You see, the list of process is reduced to the init process and the PS command. So by using some flags, you can give the container a complete access of the host. And let's see this example. When you run your container eventually, or if you are running a service inside the container and you want to access that service from the host or make it available on the internet, you will use the -p flag. And the -p flag will open the container port and map it to a port on the host. And some an undocumented, a feature of that flag that a lot of people are not aware of is when you will use the -p, Docker will automatically add firewall rules to make that port available. So anyone in the same network will automatically have access to the same port. Or if it's a public IP address, anyone on the internet will have access to that port. For example, that's how you can run a web server in a container and make it publicly available over the internet. But Docker will bypass any firewall rule you have set there, and it will make the port available for anyone. And this is what happened with NewsBlur. NewsBlur is a website that had his MongoDB database deleted after he moved it to Docker. And the issue is by default, MongoDB will give full access, admin privileges without authentication. And a lot of people just install MongoDB, they don't configure authentication, and they start using it. But they will restrict the access using a firewall so that only them can have that port. And this guy didn't foresee the fact that by moving the service inside Docker and using -p flag, Docker will add a firewall rule to make it open to the internet. So as soon as he put the database inside Docker and he opened the port, someone immediately connected to that server and deleted everything. So make sure you are not exposing sensitive applications or applications that are not secured properly. You are not exposing them using the -p flag. So the next attack surface is the volumes. Because Docker runs as with root permissions, it's very easy to gain access to restricted file. For example, I have my regular user, but I use the volume mount command to gain access to the host file system. So let's start that container. So I have a regular user account, and I use Docker run. I mount the root of the file system inside my container. And if I check, I can see the complete host file system available. I can access the etc. I can even run grep Apache or HTTPD Apache. So with my regular user account, I cannot access this file, but I can bypass that restriction by mounting the root file system using Docker, and I have the complete access to the system. So the next attack surface, the Docker images. There are a lot of images available on Docker Hub. There are millions of images everywhere, Azure, Google Cloud, AWS, you will find a lot of images, but there are also a lot of malicious images. It's relatively easy to publish an image. And some people just took advantage of that situation to create images with crypto miners, with backdoors, with cryptocurrency, with malwares, or unsecure software, misconfigured software, and they publish it on those platforms. And we had an incident this year. Some security researchers scanned the images, the Docker images, the images on Docker Hub, and they found out that a third-party malicious image was downloaded 20 millions of time, and it was running crypto mining software inside. So whenever you want to write, to run an image, make sure you trust the publisher. If I can search Docker, search HTTPD. When we search Docker HTTPD, we have a in the result we have the status column that says whether the image is official or not. Official means it is published by a trusted provider. And you see that for HTTPD, you have a lot of people publishing HTTPD, Apache HTTPD images. Anyone can build his own image. You can create your own image and publish it. You can put any kind of malware inside. You don't know what people put in their image. So I will recommend you to always use image from trusted provider. Do not use any random image on your Docker, from your Docker registry. The next issue is the Docker image immutability. Immutability means the image cannot be modified. Once they are built, they cannot be modified. And if ever a vulnerability exists in an application inside the container, whether it's a misconfiguration or an exploit, you cannot address it. And also the applications cannot be updated, which means if there is a known weakness, you cannot fix it. The only way to fix the existing issues is to use another image with newer versions of the application and where all the issues have been properly addressed. Securing the Docker daemon. Securing the Docker daemon means we are not using weak configuration settings. For example, for remote access, we will not enable plain HTTP access. So instead of just enabling remote access using TCP, you can secure the Docker daemon using TLS or SSH. And in that case, anyone who wants to connect remotely using TLS will need the TLS certificate. You will need to provide them the TLS certificate. It will ensure that you will restrict access to your Docker daemon. the other solution is use SSH to secure it. And you can also restrict the access and put your Docker daemon behind a VPN. And in the demonstration, we saw that Docker, when a user can run Docker without being root or without being in the sudo group, that user can use Docker to gain complete access to the system pretty easily. So if you want to grant a user the permission to run Docker, make sure you trust that user. Do not allow anyone to run Docker. The next recommendation is keep Docker updated, because we are regularly finding a new exploit in Docker that do not require someone to have access to your application. You will just run malicious actors will provide malicious images, and when you will run those images, they will leverage the exploit to break out of the Docker container to gain access to your host. And there are a lot of vulnerabilities that are known. So if you want to be on the safe side, update your Docker installation regularly. Now let's talk about how to make sure you are using secure images. Docker provides a command that is called scan. And it's pretty simple to run it. You run Docker scan and the image name. It will run, it will use a tool provided by Snyk. Snyk is a security tool provider, which has a partnership with Docker. So they will use that tool to scan the image to look for any malware, any misconfiguration, any vulnerability like DDoS and so on. So it will make you it will give you confidence that you are running a container that is safe to use. So let's talk about the Docker immutability again, because software in Docker is immutable. The only way to address vulnerabilities is to move to a new image that has that issue fixed. For example, you are using Apache Tomcat 2.4, which has known vulnerabilities. You want to fix those vulnerabilities, you will move to another image that will use the latest Apache version, or at least a secure Apache version. You cannot keep running the same container. You also need to run images from trusted providers. We already explained that in the demonstration. And another advice, when you run your application inside Docker, do not use the root account. Some people will configure services like Apache or MongoDB and so on, and they will run those services as the root with the root permissions. It's pretty dangerous, because if those services are abused, the attacker will automatically have the root permission. So it's a good practice to create a dedicated user in your container applications and use that user to run the applications. So even if someone managed to gain access to your container, it will still not have the root permission. And the most exciting Docker feature is it is now possible to run Docker without the root privilege. This is called the Docker rootless mode. Docker rootless mode is already generally available. So you will create a user that doesn't have any root permissions, and you will configure your Docker daemon to run using that user account. This will reduce a lot of security issues that we demonstrated. And there are some limitations because not all Docker features are supported currently with Docker rootless mode, but it's a huge step in securing Docker. So thank you, everyone. And we will move to the questions and answers. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe we can open the floor for discussion on Docker. And maybe one of you can tell us if you're using Docker. Is anyone here using Docker at the moment? Okay. So a question for, I'm just picking someone at random here. Gail?
Yes.
Hi, Gail. Welcome
Hi.
to the. Do you have? Do you use Docker in your work environment?
No, I'm not actually. I deal with the career services at Willis College, so I'm not really into the IT side of things. So no, I don't. I'm sure the instructors do, but
Yes.
I don't.
All right. Okay. And how do you find the presentation so far, Gail? You don't mind?
Actually, it's very informative for somebody who is not all that IT versed. I thought it was very, very interesting, and actually, I learned a lot. It's really good.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to, okay, I'll pick somebody else. Vijaya, how do you find the presentation? Is it easy to follow? Vijaya is still on mute. Okay, I'll move on to Vera. Vera, can you give me your feedback on the presentation?
Hi, Anna. I think it's really easy to follow, informative, since I'm not using the Docker yet. So I'm thinking about using it one day. And securely with, caution, and just really, really well structured and a lot of detailed information. Thank you, Thierry, for the presentation.
So we do see, even though the tool is very useful for developers to be able to provide quality software releases, right? Exactly as they saw it in the development environment. There are a lot of exploitation out there, either intentionally or unintentionally, but it looks more and more intentionally put there. So developers who are unaware of these vulnerabilities, thinking those tools, those images, right, Docker containers, they are convenient to use, but actually exposing themselves to hacks, right? Okay, so.
Terry, I have a question. This is Nicholas here.
Go
Yes,
ahead.
go ahead, please.
Yeah. So Terry, how does say different application architectures say sync with the Docker implementations? Like how does security parameters change from change for different architectures?
Thanks for the questions. The question actually, Docker eliminates a lot of things we have to do. For example, you are developing on Windows and you will deploy on a Linux server. Docker will eliminate that that difference, because the same image you will use to deploy your application on during the development is the same image that will be executed on production. When you publish your image, there is something called the base image. So you will pick a base image from a pre-built image. It can be Ubuntu, it can be Apache software, it can be Java. So you will pick you will build your container on top of an existing container, which is the base image, which already have the libraries for the operating system that you will pick. Some people use Ubuntu or Alpine Linux or any other distribution you want. And when you will you will create your container, everything will be packaged inside that image. And the image has all the required libraries to run. So when you will deploy your application in a different environment, it already has everything required to run. Your only problem now will be make sure you are using a configuration that is secure enough to not be exploited. For example, don't run users as root. Don't run applications that are not maintained anymore or which has known vulnerabilities. And don't expose sensitive applications to internet, or applications that are not easy to secure. Do not expose them, like we saw with the example of that MongoDB database. So you can get hacked easily. It's up to you to make sure that the app is secure enough. And Docker runs with virtualization, which means it is isolated from the host. Docker processes are isolated, so it will make sure that everything that happens inside the container will remain inside the container. Unless, like we demonstrated, you are running your containers and you will enable dangerous permissions like mounting sensitive folders of the file system, or giving incorrect permissions like see the host process and so on. Unless you run your container with dangerous flags, there all the security issues will be mitigated.
Okay. And how does say Docker and containerization work in case of migration from say one cloud provider to other cloud provider? Say if I'm migrating to AWS from Microsoft Cloud, so how does so containerization and Docker?
That's a good question. Docker, the Docker exactly what Docker does is exactly eliminating the friction of running your application in a different environment. So it doesn't matter whether you move it to AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or even your own server, it doesn't matter, because the container already has all the dependencies that are required to run it.
Okay.
So it will just run no matter where you run it, as long as Docker is supported on that platform.
Okay. So, and also, where do you see more risk? Like, you see risk from external actors or say internal actors, like the threat risk?
You cannot give more weight to external or internal attackers because we don't always know all the security issues. Some issues are disclosed, some are not disclosed. But the big security aspect is running Docker securely. For example, do not give the permission to run Docker to anyone because that person can abuse Docker to gain root privilege pretty easily. And on the other side is that you need to keep Docker updated, because even when you are running a secure application, Docker vulnerabilities can be leveraged to gain root access to the host. So the Docker team is working hard as addressing those issues.
Okay.
So my recommendation will be keep Docker updated and make sure the app you are running inside Docker are secure enough. Don't use weak credentials. Don't use misconfigured applications.
Okay. Okay. So, are there any standard tests that you recommend for, say, Docker security theory, or any tools?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Are there any standard tests to regularly monitor, say, Docker security?
Yes, we talk about the Docker scan command that can be used to scan the containers regularly to make sure that they are secure. You can also use security tools. I talk about the Sneak, which is a security tool to assess application security. They will find credentials that are accidentally leaked in the applications. They will find malware, they will find possible exploit and so on. So you have third-party tools that you can use to assess the security of your Docker containers. And on the other hand, you need to keep Docker up to date to address all the known vulnerabilities.
So Thierry,
Yes.
how often do you think we should scan for Docker vulnerabilities? Or is there a set time they're releasing? Or is this some like hot fixes that gets released, anytime?
So I will say that this is up to you. It's just like you are running your antivirus software on your computer. You will decide that you will run it once a week or once a month. It's really up to you to decide. But if you run too often, it can be intrusive and.
Thierry, your audio is up.
Okay.
Yeah. Could you please repeat? I think like the last minute, your audio became choppy.
So I was saying that it is really up to you to decide how often you want to run the security tools. But it will be a good practice to scan the image whenever you want to run your container, or after an update, you will run the security scan. Or after you create your image, you will scan it to make sure that there is no vulnerability. Or if you want to use any third-party image, you will scan it before running. That's what I will recommend.
Okay, so that is at a developer level. As an organization, is not interrupted too often, checking for vulnerabilities in Docker.
Yes, I was saying that you will run a scan probably when there is a change in the environment. For example, you have changed the container images, or you have changed an application that was running on the container. Maybe you updated it. You will scan the image before pushing it to production. Or you can also run a scan once a week to make sure that everything is safe.
Okay, so which means in IT as well, we can have a scan set up by IT on all the containers
Yes.
to advise developers if they've missed something. Okay. Okay, good. So I see. Kata? Nicholas, 1 second. Kata, do you have any feedback on the presentation, please? Or the webinar?
Yes, Anna, I was following it. I think first and foremost is
Some problem.
Hello, is it clear now? Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Sir. Yes.
Yeah, first
Yes,
and
Kata,
foremost is I think the Docker as a matter of practice in the organization, I think it's getting a lot of attention in the companies in deploying the solutions and making it much more versatile, especially also from a scalability point of view, especially auto scaling options which are available in AWS and in a quick way to deploy the solutions. I think Docker and containerization is becoming very popular, and I think it's very important every developer to learn the concept of Dockerization and understanding all the pitfalls and security aspects as Thierry mentioned. I think it's very, very interesting and very important session in my opinion. So just as a from Ideabytes point of view, if I see, I think practicing Docker and deploying the solutions from the Docker is, I think, is the first step to learn and then practice it, because it's becoming very, very important, and it also helps in terms of productivity. That's my feedback. But overall, the session is very, very interesting and very covered many aspects of the pitfalls and security loopholes theory. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, Kata. George, any comments?
A good presentation and educates people as to what not to do when using Docker. Well, Docker is powerful. The privileges have to be managed very well, and which is what Thierry put into this presentation.
Okay, thank you, George. Okay, anybody else? Okay, we have about 4 minutes in the webinar. So what I see here is for developers, right? When you start using Docker, at the beginning itself, you need to have a checklist, full checklist of what are all the pitfalls, and go through it and make sure when you are using Docker that you do not expose any of such vulnerabilities. That is at the development stage, and it releases as well. And go through the checklist, make sure you have addressed what the pitfalls before the release or the deployment, and compare the quality. Right? Compare if whatever that you have secured in development is not reappearing in deployment. Right? This is how we secure the integrity of software. Improving productivity and confidence in the product quality, right? Your product quality, your work, because you may not have control over the environment in the deployment. You may have control over the environment in development. So things may have changed on the development, on the deployment environment infrastructure. Right? So Docker gives you a lot of control over the quality of the software that you secure at development, being the same at deployment. Okay. So on that note, Thierry, anything else to add, Thierry?
No, Anna, I think you just highlighted the why of using Docker, which is that your application will no longer depend on where you will deploy it or the version of operating system you are using or the architecture, or either you are using x64 or an ARM architecture. It doesn't matter. As long as Docker is supported, you are guaranteed that your software will run smoothly.
Okay, on that note, thank you everybody for your participation and your feedback. So we will have this recording available for all the participants and the presentation as well. So we one last question. Please also indicate we will be running a series of security webinars. Okay, so if you are interested in any topic, please share that in this forum. And we will, work on addressing the issues that you bring up in our next webinar. Okay. Thank you, Thierry. Thank you, everyone, for participating. With this, we'll conclude the webinar. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Thierry.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, Thierry.